All right.
I saw something on, it's, about, the Bible and people say it's not true and all this kind of stuff. That, scientific archaeology excavation, they always digging and looking over there. And this was found, it said, let's see, the southern part of the wall surrounding Jerusalem's old city. And it said it was under somewhere there, it says it was a refuge dump. And it says that Israel existed long before Palestine was even a thought. And what they did, they found it's a piece of clay, and I don't know how big it is. It may be like, they used to use and put a wax and seal it or whatever, but they found it, and it said it took them 5 years to figure out what it said. But it was King Hezekiah's royal seal. And it said it was 700 BC.
Yep. Yep.
And it said first found seal of biblical Israel king. And it proved that, that Bible is true.
Oh, yeah.
It is very, you run across these things and I find them interesting. They called it a B-U-L-L-A. I don't know how you say it.
Cool. I don't know. Yeah, we don't need physical things, or we shouldn't need physical things to increase our faith. But I got to tell you, every time I read or hear something, it really thrills my soul to know that history and archaeology is now proving the scriptures to be true. Something else along that line. I think I told you this before, but when we made our trip over to Israel, one of the things that I got to do that I really enjoyed was I got to walk through Hezekiah's tunnel, which was the tunnel was carved through solid stone that connected the spring of Gihon that was over on the east side to the pool of Siloam. It's about 700 yards long. And as I was walking through there, they have a spot that's about halfway, and it's a plaque. What's there right now is a reproduction, but as they, earlier on, somebody found a plaque that was inscribed by King Hezekiah that told the story of how he got the two work crews working from either direction, and how when they joined up, how the water flowed. But yeah, that's very interesting stuff.
And it's strange that I saw this. I was listening on the radio, riding along, and the guy, he was inside of that tunnel and talking, and they were wading through it, and he's talking to the other guy, and he's telling him, this is on Christian radio, the city or the country or something, I forget what the name of the program is, they always have something on there, and he's walking through, and you can hear the water sloshing, and he said, he's answering questions, and they have someplace in there that they have dead ends, because and he said the way they did it was they just say, hey, and it's unreal, He said, oh, there's a dead end, and they had a little.
Well, what Hezekiah says in his little plaque, he says that he had one crew start from one end, which is where the pool of Siloam is, and one crew start from the spring of Gihon. And when they met, he said the water flowed. It's like, man, it was just great engineering. But as you say, there are some. I mean, it meanders. And I went to one place I was walking through that the ceiling height was. I mean, I had to kind of squat down, so it must have been about 5.5 feet tall. And I come to another area, and the ceiling is like 20 feet tall. And so you say, well, what happened there? And I stopped and I thought about it. Why would they do that? Well, what happened is the original tunnel was up there, and they saw one was down here, so they had to tunnel down and then make the floor even. So, they did a lot of
When they were,
adaptation, a little re-engineering as they went along the way,
He said they were going along, and he said they made a 90-degree turn.
Well, I think what they're doing is they're doing a lot of zigzagging because they didn't know where they were going to meet, so they're hoping is with the zigs and the zags, eventually a zig would hit a zag and then connect up.
90-degree correction.
Yeah. So, nevertheless, still an amazing work. Water's still flowing there, like so I walked through, the water's still flowing for 2,700 years.
Bring your rubber boots. I forget, he called them something brain. Anyway, and he said, but if you're claustrophobic, don't go through.
It's dark and it's long. And the depth of the water ranged from about ankle deep up to maybe mid-thigh on me, so, you know, it wasn't a perfect grade either on the floor. But
Are
still,
there lights down there? You have to bring your own flashlight or what?
take your own flashlight, yeah. It's dark, no lights. But you can still see the tool marks, you know, along the ceilings and the walls, which is pretty fascinating to think that those tools chipped that away 2,700 years ago. So very interesting. One other thing about it, you mentioned Palestine. Every time these days that I hear the name Palestine used, it makes my skin crawl because it's almost always used improperly. Where in the Bible is the Holy Land referred to as Palestine? Nowhere. What is the Holy Land referred to in the Scriptures? It's either Israel or it's the land of Canaan, right? Abraham was called to the land of Canaan. That's where the Canaanites lived. And later on it was called the land of Israel because God gave it to Jacob, who became Israel.
The land of milk and honey.
Judah. Was that?
Judah, the land of milk and honey.
Yeah, that's right. And it was, you know, we had the 12 tribes had their names. You got a section that's called Judah. Part of it's called, by the names of the 12 tribes. You know, Reuben, Simeon, Levi. I mean, Levi doesn't have one, but all the others. So where does Palestine come from?
The Philistines.
Exactly. It wasn't until the great diaspora after the Romans were successful in driving out all of the Jews. This would have been maybe the first or second century AD. The Romans went in there because the Jews revolted so much. We know that in 70 AD they destroyed the temple. And then we know the story of Masada. You had the last group that held out on Masada. They sent the Roman legion in, finally wiped them out. They committed suicide. But the Romans hated the Jews so much, and they wanted them out of there. They said, look, you leave, and if a Jew shows up in this land, we're going to kill him. So they were under a death sentence. They had to leave the land. And to add insult to injury, the Romans named the land Palestine after the Philistines because they knew that the Jews hated the Philistines. And so that is a Roman name. Palestine is a Roman name that was given to the Holy Land as an insult to the Jews. And so sometimes you talk about, you know, historians, I know they do it out of just a lack of information, but they refer to what Palestine was like at the time of Jesus. Well, it wasn't Palestine then, okay? And the Palestinians are really not, that they're referred to now, they're not an indigenous people there. You know, they're Arabs who have come from other places who have claimed the land. They are descendants of Ishmael to a great extent, and also Edom.
I also run across a lady, I don't remember, her first name is Bridget, and she's from Lebanon. And when she was 15 years old, they came in and they bombed and destroyed their place, and they were killing Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And her family lived in an 8x10 bomb shelter, and they would crawl out at night. They had some kind of ditch or something, and they would crawl there to go get some water, a little bit of water, and they were being shot at, and they would go out and get dandelions and anything, you know, something to eat. And she was, I don't know where she was, but she was talking, it was like in a church, and she was 15 then, and she's, I'd say, 30 something. And she was telling what the Muslims, they have done, you know, that their agenda and all this, and how the president has hooked in with the Muslim, whatever, in all these groups. Seemed like she said when they got together in 1928 or something like that, there were 70 of these groups, and that's when they decided their plan to take over the world.
Yeah. Well, don't believe what you hear on TV from the liberal media about the nation or the government of Israel discriminating against the Palestinians, because they don't. Israel as a nation will integrate so-called Palestinians or Arabs or whoever wants to be a law-abiding citizen. The group of people that Israel fights against are those Palestinians who take up arms and lob missiles and are trying to destroy Israel.
And the only way they made it was that whoever was left, they went to Israel, and they said, if you help us, we're a buffer zone, and they came in, and she said, it was a miracle that they came in and drove them back
Yeah.
out of Lebanon, so,
Yeah. All right, let's get on to our lesson. Continuing our study of Genesis. I think last time we got through most of chapter 25. Today we're going to try to take up 26 and cover as much of 27 as we can also. But by way of review, remember last time at the end of chapter 25, we learned that Isaac's wife, Rebekah, was barren, and she prayed to God and Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren, and ultimately she conceived and she bore twins. But while the twins were still in her womb, she inquired of the Lord because she was having, excessive morning sickness and problems, and there was a great disruption within her. And in verse 23 of chapter 25, the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 people shall be separated from your body. And 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Excuse me. Now, we know also that Rebekah was barren for 20 years, and these 2 boys were born when Isaac was 60 years old. Okay? So, he was no spring chicken when these 2 boys come along. And we saw last time that after the boys were born, Esau was the firstborn, but his brother Jacob was clinging to his heel. Okay? Jacob was the secondborn. It says in verse 28, now Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. And then we read the story about how Esau, who's also known as Edom, was willing to give up his birthright for what?
Stew.
Just a bowl of stew, which showed what? That he didn't really place much value. He didn't cherish. He did not treasure his birthright. And even though maybe Jacob employed a little bit of trickery, or maybe he took advantage of his brother, we see here, if there is one redeeming factor about Jacob, is that he really valued this birthright. And of course, the main aspect of the birthright to which we should ascribe value is that this birthright was the progenitorship, if you will, of the coming Christ. Jacob, of course, could not have known that, but at least in his spirit, he saw the value of it and he treasured it, and so he wanted it. All right, so let's pick up from there. Before we get there, one of the things that we wanted to explore a little bit that we left off last time is that how throughout the scriptures it is said of God that God said that he loved Jacob but he hated Esau. Now you say, why would God hate Esau from the time of his birth? Why would God hate an innocent baby? Well, again, this is allegorical. And we see the explanation of that Paul gives in the scriptures, but one of the best explanations of the division or the difference between Jacob and Esau and what the two represent allegorically is found in Romans chapter 8, verses 5 through 9. Let me just read that for you. You might want to make yourself a little note. Romans 8, chapter 8, verses 5 through 9. For those who are according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who are according to the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. So what's Paul talking about? He's talking about people, human beings, that either they do one or two things. They either set their minds on the flesh and they desire fleshly things, or they set their minds on the Spirit and they desire spiritual things. And as Jesus put it so well, you can't do both. No man can serve 2 masters. Either you pursue one or you pursue the other. Paul goes on to say in Romans chapter 8, he says, for the mind set on the flesh is death, but the mind set on the Spirit is life and peace. Because the mind set on the flesh is hostile towards God. Now get that. The mind set on the flesh is hostile towards God, for it does not subject itself to the law of God, for it is not even able to do so. And those who are in the flesh cannot please God. However, you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if indeed the Spirit of God dwells in you. So the whole idea here is that those who are in the flesh, or those who are pursuing the flesh, cannot please God. And so metaphorically, God hates those who are pursuing the flesh, but he loves those who are pursuing the Spirit. So when we read about this division between Jacob and Esau, Jacob being loved and Esau being hated, again, metaphorically speaking, Esau represents the mind that is set on the flesh. Jacob represents the mind set on the Spirit. And you can see how God loves one and he hates the other. Not that God loves or loved one baby and hated another baby just because they were babies, but again, it is metaphorically speaking for what they represent and what they would come to be. We're going to read more about that when we get to chapter 27 and delve into that. But let's go through chapter 26, and we'll do that rather hurriedly. But as we do, I want you to see that as we read through chapter 26, that it seems like it's almost a replay of what we read in Genesis chapter 20 about Abraham. And then when we get over to verses 26 and following of chapter 26, is just like the second part of Genesis 21. So let's read that quickly and let's talk about it.
You know, the devil can really play with your mind on this deal here, because you can say predestination.
Mm-hmm.
And if you predestinate it, I'm confused with it, to be honest with you. Why even try? I mean, God Lord's going to do what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I have a lot of confusion with it. And if, I'll be honest with you, I do.
A lot of people that tell me you're not alone in that. And we could spend several classes probably talking about predestination. And let's lay that aside for just a bit, but I do want to come back to it because a lot of this deals with the idea of predestination. And then actually what predestination is and how predestination, I think, is largely misunderstood by Christians today.
I'm confused with it.
Okay. A lot of folks are. We'll get back to it. I'm not going to leave it. I'm just pushing you back a little bit, not putting you off totally. Okay. All right, chapter 26. Jackie, would you start reading there?
Now there was a famine in the land besides the earlier famine of Abraham's time. And as Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines near Gerar.
Or pause right there. Remember, Abraham went to Abimelech, who was the king of the Philistines, in the very same place. And this place, Gerar, is over near where the Gaza Strip is. So it is the land of the Philistines. So he was venturing in a place that he shouldn't be. Go ahead.
The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land where I tell you to live. Stay in this land for a while, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all these lands, and will confirm the oath I swore to your father Abraham."
Pause right there just a second. Remember, the assignment that was given to Abraham was go and inhabit the land of Canaan that I will show you. We know that at one point in time when a famine came up, where did Abraham, or Abram at that time, and Sarah go?
Egypt.
They went all the way down in Egypt. Did God want them to go to Egypt? No. God wanted them to stay and maintain their station, stay there in the land. Well, a famine comes up again a generation later at the time of Isaac. Isaac's probably thinking about going down to Egypt. God says, don't go down to Egypt. He winds up in the land of the Philistines, which some writers, some commentators call, that's kind of the halfway house. All right, he's not inhabiting the land that God told him to, but he's not going all the way down to Egypt either. He's kind of in the middle here, and he falls into some problems. Kenny, would you pick up in verse 4?
I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. Am I in the right place?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. And will give them all these lands, and through your offsprings all nations on earth will be blessed.
Pause right there. Does that sound familiar?
Oh, yeah.
That's the part of the covenant between God and Abraham. So God is now coming to Isaac, and he's saying that I'm going to make a covenant with you, but I'm going to do it on the basis of my relationship with Abraham and what Abraham did. And it's very interesting. We talked before about how God works in sequence. And you'll see here that when God came to Abraham, he made a covenant with him. When he comes to Isaac, he said, basically says, I'm the God of your father Abraham. When he comes to Jacob, he says, I'm the father of, I'm the God of Abraham and Isaac. When he later comes to Moses, he said, I'm the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. So God is working in sequence to build his people into the nation that he wants them to be. And he starts off with the life of Abraham, and then he does it through Isaac, and he does it through Jacob, and then he does it through others. And we see God's hand in all of this as we go through his history. Okay, read on.
Because Abraham obeyed and kept my requirements, my commands, my decrees, and my laws. So Isaac stayed in Gerar. When the men of that place asked him about his wife, he said, she is my sister. Because he was afraid to say she is my wife, he thought. The men of this place might kill me on account of Rebekah because she is beautiful.
Pause right there. Have we heard that story before? Isn't that exactly the same thing that Abraham did with Sarah? And isn't that exactly the excuse? He said, all right, he said, Sarah, she's my sister. He was telling a half truth and a half lie because she was his half sister. But the reason he told the half lie and the half truth is why? Because he was afraid that they'd kill him. So Isaac does the same thing. As Jackie said, that apple didn't fall too far from the tree, did it? Okay, read on.
Well, let me answer this here. If he had killed him, and would that made it all right for him to sleep with his wife then?
Who, Abimelech?
Uh-huh.
According to their culture. Because she wouldn't have been married. She'd have been a widow.
So,
So, don't ask me to explain the logic of it.
Well, didn't David do the same thing?
Yeah.
Well, he slept with her before she was a widow. Remember Bathsheba?
Yeah.
But then he had the husband killed,
Yeah.
and then,
Strange
made it all
morality.
right.
well, it really did.
Strange, twisted morality. Sort of reminds me of today.
Hey,
People don't
King Henry
change.
did some of that killing, didn't he?
What's that?
King Henry VIII.
Yes, he did. He sure did.
Just goes to show you people don't
Just
change.
twisted morality. They really don't. They really don't. Okay, Wanda, would you pick up where you left off?
When Isaac had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked down from a window and saw Isaac caressing his wife Rebekah. So Abimelech summoned Isaac and said, "She is really your wife. Why did you say she is my sister?" Isaac answered him, "Because I thought I might lose my life on account of her." Then Abimelech said, "What is this you have done to us? One of the men might well have slept with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." So Abimelech gave orders to all the people, "Anyone who molests this man or his wife shall surely be put to death." Isaac planted crops in that land, and the same year reaped 100-fold, because the Lord blessed him. The man became rich, and his wealth continued to grow until he became very wealthy. He had so many flocks and herds and shepherds that the Philistines envied him. So all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the time of his Abraham, the Philistines stopped up, filling them with earth.
Pause right there. Remember, Abraham was a pretty prolific well digger, we learn here. So he dug a bunch of wells in his own time, but by the time Isaac comes along, the Philistines had filled all the wells up with dirt. Why would they do that?
Drive him out of there, huh?
Could be.
Well, you have to have water for the
Water's like
flocks and
gold.
herds.
Yeah. But why would anybody, if you have a well on your land, why would you fill it in?
Try to drive other people out.
Drive other people away, or just because you're just slap crazy, you know? That or mean that could be. The kind of strange thing. I think there's a metaphorical meaning here too. Oftentimes, water, and particularly a well, has to do with the flowing of truth. Okay. And for Abraham digging the wells, I think, is a metaphor for him bringing about the truth of God. And we know that it worked. Why? Because even the Philistines feared Abraham, and they feared Isaac. They knew God was with him. So some amount of God's truth was flowing along. But the Philistines, being an implant of Satan, were all about stopping the truth. So I think filling up the wells, metaphorically speaking, refers to the efforts of Satan through the Philistines to prevent the flow of information, if you will, or the truth of God throughout the land. Tom, you start to say something?
Yeah, you can take and put in that in today's time. whenever they get in those fights, what do? They go over there and they bomb it, they destroy all the oil wells that they can.
Yeah,
And it's just, it's all, but same thing as water. You know,
Yeah.
that's where they get all the money from and everything.
that's right. You remember after Desert Storm, when the Iraqis withdrew from Kuwait, what did they do?
Set them on fire.
Set all the oil wells on fire, and it burned and it burned and it burned for a long time. They're crazy.
That sums it up.
Well, it destroyed them. and
Yeah.
That's what they was after.
Nancy, would you pick up 17?
Not 16?
16.
16, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And Abimelech said to Isaac, Go away from us, ye have become too powerful for us. So Isaac departed from there and camped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of his father Abraham. For the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham, and he gave them the names that his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of spring water, the herders of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herders, saying, The water is ours. So he called the well Esek, because they contended with him.
Pause right there. There's a metaphor within that too. Can you see what that is? When the well starts flowing water again, one says, it's mine, the other says, no, it's mine. What is that?
Southern Baptist fighting.
One claiming a monopoly on the truth. No, we got the truth. No, we own the truth. You know, that's still going on. Islam says, no, we have the truth. And Christianity says, no, we have the real truth.
Did y'all see
Same
any
kind
of
of
those whales over there?
What's that?
Did y'all see any of those whales over there?
We did. We went to Beersheba, and there's an old well right there, the very one they talk about, the well of the oath. That's what Beersheba means.
Now, was it a flowing well or is it just the one you dipped out of?
It was a dip. It was just a deep hole in the ground.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, with a little stone encasement around it that people throw their buckets down in there.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the way they were. We sure did. I should have. In fact, I need to find. I think I took a picture of that. There's several occasions I want to take pictures of the things, but my camera wouldn't work. Either that or it's operator error. I think it was a camera. But
You know, up in Mississippi right now, you can go to old home spots and you can still find whales up there.
There are.
Now, I'm sure there's some in Louisiana, but I've just
Uh-huh.
seen them in Mississippi up there.
Yeah.
And how they dug in there, I don't know, because they were straight down and they wouldn't very big around. They wouldn't even 6 feet, across up there. And how they dug in there, I don't know, but man.
seemed like being a well digger would be a dangerous occupation.
Yeah, it would fall in and everything.
I guess so.
And cave in on it.
Yeah.
I know that this guy, Sonny Harrington, he had one on his place, up at Gilsburg, and one of his young calves took and walked and fell into that well and died before he knew what happened to it.
Yeah.
And so he had dump trucks to come in there then
Just fill it in.
and fill them in.
Yeah.
And that's been, within the last 25 years that happened.
Just like the Philistines did.
Well, the water, my uncle and that, well, my great uncle, I guess it was, they had one and, water was flowing. It wasn't, it's not enough
Right,
pressure.
not an artesian well,
To shove it up out of the ground. But what, when they dug down, they hit the water flow.
Yeah.
And it was there because the water, when you let the thing down in there and catch some, it was, what is it, 50-something degrees.
Cool water. Okay, let's read on, Nancy.
Then they dug another well, and they quarreled over that one also, so he called it Sitnah. He moved from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it, so he called it Rehoboth, saying, Now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. From there he went up to Beersheba, and that very night the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you and will bless you, and make your offspring numerous for my servant Abraham's sake. So he built an altar there, called on the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants dug a well. Then Abimelech went to him from Gerar with Ahuzah his advisor, and Phicol the commander of his army. Isaac said to them, "Why have you come to me, seeing that you hate me, and have sent me away from you?" They said, "We see plainly that the Lord has been with you. So we say, let there be an oath between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you, so that you will do us no harm. Just as we have not touched you, and have done to you nothing but good, and have sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of the Lord." So we made them a feast, and they ate and drank. In the morning they rose early and exchanged oaths, and Isaac sent them on their way, and they departed from him in peace.
Pause right there. You'll find that this event right here is very similar to what you have in the second half of Genesis 21, where Abimelech came to Abraham and they made an oath. And you say, well, now why do we have this? Well, we know they made an oath and they made a covenant with each other. We know that when Joshua went to recapture the promised land after the Egyptian slavery and after 40 years in the wilderness, what is one of the things that God told Joshua not to do when he went into the promised land?
Not to make an oath with any of the people in that land.
Exactly. Don't make an oath, don't make a covenant with any people in the land. Why?
They were to destroy them all.
Supposed to destroy them. Plus, they're not supposed to have a close relationship. A covenant implies a close relationship, and God didn't want Abraham or Isaac to learn anything from these indigenous people. He wanted his people, the Hebrews, the Jews, to be separated from these people. So I'll submit to you that Isaac made the same mistake, even though he was not prohibited by God from doing this. He made the same mistake that his father did by making a covenant with these indigenous people, and that caused him some problems. Okay, read on. Terry, would you pick up in, was it verse 32?
32.
All right, let's, Johnny, you want to read? Okay. Terry.
That day Isaac's servants came and told him about the well they had dug. They said, "We've found water." He called it Shavah. And to this day, the name of the town has been Beersheba. When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, daughter of Beeri, the Hittite, and also Basemath, daughter of Elon the Hittite. They were the source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah.
Some of you can relate to that. But before we get past that, Tommy, if you see in verse 33, they dug a well there in Beersheba. And yeah, there is a well right there. We went there, and I tried to take a picture of that well in Beersheba. Mm-hmm. But I think that is an ancient well. They don't know how far back it goes, but it could have been one that was dug by either Abraham or Isaac. All right, then we look in verse 34. It says, "And when Esau was 40 years old, he married two women. One of them was Beeri, and one of them was Basemath."
No, the daughter of Beeri.
I'm sorry, the daughter of Beeri, the Hittite, and Basemath, it says the daughter of Elon the Hittite. Well, if you look over in Genesis chapter 36, verse 3, you'll see that this Basemath is also the daughter of Ishmael. So Esau marries an Ishmaelite. Now, what I want to do here is I want to set the stage for what happens in chapter 27, because chapter 27 is a story that you've all heard before. It's about Jacob's deception of his father Isaac in his old age. And like I said, we know the story, we know the facts, but the question is, what is the symbolism there? What is the allegory there? What are we to learn from the story? We must first study the facts before we can get into the allegory and the spiritual meaning. I know that there's a spiritual meaning to that. I know there's allegory there. And how do I know that? Well, Jesus himself said, remember when he told the men on the Emmaus Road, he said he opened up the scriptures and he revealed himself in all of the scriptures. So we have a story about Christ in chapter 27, as odd as it may seem. But let's set the stages. Chapter 27 starts out, in fact, Sarah, why don't you read, or Terry, why don't you read a little bit more? Just read a couple of those verses to us to kind of see where we are.
When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son, here I am," he answered. Isaac said, "I am now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your weapons, your quiver and bow, and go out into the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare the kind of tasty food I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die.
All right, pause right there. Okay, so what do we know? It says that at this point in time, Isaac was old. It says Isaac was old and his eyes were too dim to see. I think you need to focus on that because I think that plays an important part in the allegory. Oh, anybody remember how old Isaac was when he died?
140?
No, he was actually 180 years old when he died. Okay, how old was he when his sons were born? 60. Okay, so how old would his sons have been at the time that Isaac died?
40.
120. Yeah, 180 minus 60, they'd be 120 years old. Now, we don't know if this happened at the time of Isaac's death, when he was 180 years old. Some say that this happens maybe 40 years before his death. But, assuming that Isaac was a young man of 140 years old, how old would that make his sons? Almost 80 years old. So one of the things we have to see in this is that the two sons that the aged Isaac is dealing with, they're not teenagers, they're not young boys, they're probably 70 to 80 years old. Jacob and Esau were probably, again, 70 to 80 years old at the time this event took place. Could have been older, they could have been 100 years old. We know that at least 20 years passed from the time of this event until the death of Isaac. Probably more than that, but if it's 20, they're what, 160 years old. So these guys are not young men. They're old men by today's standard. They're in their 70s or their 80s. Isaac is over 100. Somebody have a question?
Will you take, in this day and time, whenever you inherit from your parents what they have gotten, you're an old person yourself. I know all of our family was, the youngest one was 50.
Yeah,
And 75.
that's right.
So it's nothing changed there. You're not inheriting when you're young.
No.
You get it when it's old. And
And I thought you were going to say that old folks aren't beyond trickery either.
Well,
That's true.
The lady that I was talking about, Bridget, the Christian lady, her parents, she said her dad was 55 when she was born.
Wow. Wow. All right, so as the story opens here, Isaac is an old man. His eyes were too dim to see, but he calls Esau. And why does he call Esau in?
He's the oldest son.
he was old.
He's the oldest son, but
He's also his favorite.
it's his favorite, right? And
He likes the way he cooks.
what does he want from Esau?
He wants some venison.
That's right. He wants some venison. He says, "Man, you make just a really good venison stew. How about cooking me up some?" And then what is Isaac going to do for Esau?
He's going to give him his
He's going to
blessing.
give him the blessing. All right.
So they're gonna have a party.
They're going to have a party, but all right. So what is wrong with that? Isaac, at this point in time, he is going to bestow the blessing on Esau. Should he have known better than that?
It's already been given away.
Well, there's at least three things going against Isaac right now to justify his actions. Number one, at the time the boys were born, God himself came to Rebekah and said what? The older shall serve the younger. And I suspect that Rebekah did not keep that secret from Isaac. So Isaac, I'll submit to you, he knew from the very beginning that God had ordained that Jacob would be the one to inherit, because again he said the older shall serve the younger. Secondly, as somebody said, I don't think the transaction between Jacob and Esau was kept secret. The transaction whereby Esau sold his birthright to his son. Okay, so Isaac should have known about that. Okay, and he shouldn't have tried to bypass the contract that was made. And then what's the third point? What's the third reason why Isaac should not have bestowed his blessing upon Esau?
He was married to those Hittite women.
That's right. Wasn't that an Ishmaelite? A Hittite. He had married a Hittite who was a resident Canaanite, right? one of the women that Isaac knew that he was not supposed to marry an indigenous woman. That's why he went back to his father's homeland. But you're exactly right. A Hittite, Canaanite, Ishmaelite. So Esau was disqualified, but nevertheless, Isaac wants to bestow the blessing on him.
Because he likes him best.
Not just because he likes him best, because I think one of the reasons he likes him is what? He cooks a mean venison stew.
He was listening to the devil talking.
His
Yeah.
stomach.
Which tells you what about Isaac at this point in time? His eyes were too dim to see, meaning what? Not only was he not seeing well,
His spiritual eyes were dim.
his
also.
spiritual eyes were very dim. What is he? Is he serving the spirit, or is he serving the flesh at this point in time?
Flesh.
He's purely serving the flesh, isn't he? That's why he is doing what God doesn't do. He is loving the flesh. He is loving Esau. And he's loving Esau, why? Because Esau serves the flesh. So then what happens? Soft to come? Okay. Sarah, you want to read or you want to pass? Verse 5.
Verse what?
5. Chapter 27, verse 5.
Well. Now Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game, my throat was messed up.
And bring it back. Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, bring me some game and prepare some tasty food to eat, so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now, my son, listen carefully what to do. What I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, so I can prepare some tasty food for your father, just the way he likes it, and take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies." Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, "But my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a man with smooth skin. What if my father touches me? I would appear to be tricking him and would bring down a curse upon myself rather than a blessing." His mother said to him, "My son, let the curse fall on me, just as do what I say, and get them for me." So he went and got them and brought them to his mother, and she prepared some tasty food, just the way his father liked it. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, she had in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. She also covered his hands with the smooth part of his neck with goat skins. Then she handed it to her son Jacob the tasty food and bread she had made.
Pause right there. Okay, so we have Isaac, who, again, he's getting dim, and his desire at this point in time is for the older son Esau, who should have been accursed, but he's calling for him. He says, "I'm going to put a blessing on him," because why? Because he's going to bring me some food that I like. Rebekah hears about this, and she says, it's not going to happen. So she goes and she gets Jacob. And she says, "Jacob, here's what's going to happen." He said, "I'm going to cook up some food." She says, "You know what?" He says, "Your brother's a pretty good cook, but I think I'm just a little bit better cook than he is. I can cook up something that your dad likes. I'm going to prepare some food. And also, I'm going to take your brother's clothes, and I'm going to put your brother's clothes on you. And not only that, I'm going to take some skins and put it on your arms and on your neck, so that when your dad goes to hug you, he'll know that since you're a smooth man and your brother's a hairy man, he'll feel the hair on your arms and he'll feel the hair on the back of your neck, and he won't know that it's you." Jacob, what's his first reaction to that? His first reaction is,
I don't think so. My dad's going to find out, then
Yeah.
he'll be cursed.
not that he doesn't want the blessing,
Right.
he just thinks that his dad is smarter than that, and his mother says, "Nope, just leave everything to me. We're going to take care of it." Okay, but think about those things. We're not going to have time today to talk about our allegory, but the facts we need to have here is that Rebekah intervenes. She cooks up the scheme, not unlike the scheme that Sarah cooked up, remember? So Rebekah cooks up a scheme, and she provides the food. She provides the clothes and she provides the other skin for deception, and then she sends him on his way. All right, who wants to pick up from there? Joanne? I think verse
In
6.
18. And he came unto his father and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, who art thou, my son? And Jacob said unto his father, I am Esau, thy firstborn. I have done according as thou badest me. Arise, and I pray thee, sit and eat my venison, that thy soul may bless me. And Isaac said unto his son, How is it that thou hast found it so quickly, my son? And he said, Because the Lord thy God brought it to me. And Isaac said unto Jacob, Come near, I pray thee, that I may feel thee and my son, whether thou be my very son Esau or not. And Jacob went near him, and Jacob went near unto Isaac his father, and he felt him, and said, The voice of Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he discerned him not, because his hands were hairy, as his brother's Esau's hands. So he blessed him. And he said, Art thou my very son Esau? And he said, I am. And he said, Bring it near to me, and I will eat of my son's venison, and my soul may bless thee. And he brought it near him, and he did not eat. And he brought him wine, and he drank. And his father Isaac said unto him, Come near now, and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his raiment, and he blessed him, and he said, See, the smell of my son is the smell of the field which the Lord hath blessed. Therefore God give thee the dew of heaven, and the fatness of the earth, and plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee, nations bow down to thee. O be Lord over thy brother, and thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be one that cursed thee, and blessed be he that blesseth me.
So Isaac bestows his blessing upon Jacob, and why does he do it?
He thinks he's Esau.
Yep, and why does he think he's Esau?
Because he still stays here.
He brings the food, he's bringing food to him, which is what he really wants. But not only that, he's wearing his brother's garments, right? Because he smells the clothes, and then he also feels the flesh that has been put on. So it is because of deception, but it is because of the three things that he brought that the deception is complete. Okay?
You didn't notice the difference in the food?
Yeah, between what the goats and the venison.
Yeah,
And he still blessed him.
yeah, still blessed him. Maybe he did a different.
You said Sarah and Rebecca did the same type of deception, but Sarah's was against what God wanted. This lady's was in line with what God wanted.
That's true. That's true. It is consistent. Now we don't have time to go through all this, but I want you to think about this. We're going to discuss this in some length when we get together next week, and maybe we can weave into that a discussion of predestination. But as you read this story, I want you to read about it, and I'll tell you this. I did a lot of searching this week, find some commentators who had unraveled the mystery of the allegory that's contained in this, and frankly, I didn't find it anywhere. I don't think anybody caught on to what I think is here. So I want y'all to think about it and pray about it and see if the Spirit will reveal to you the truth of this, and particularly how Christ is revealed in this rather strange story.